Welcome to Braintree Historical Society. My name is Jim Fay, Director of the Museum Archives. Today we'll be honoring Veterans Day, showing a lot of the displays. A lot of artifacts will be explained by our volunteer here, Jeremy Frayne. And I'd like to have Jeremy come over now and start explaining.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Braintree Historical Society. As Jim has probably already mentioned, my name is Jeremy Frayne, and this has kind of been my brainchild for the last couple of years. World War I was a very tumultuous war. It was supposed to be the war to end all wars, but unfortunately, that is not the case. Braintree had a great role, a very big role in World War I. 419 men from Braintree, men and women, I should say, served in the armed forces. Of those, 8 did not return. Braintree had its own home guard, the Braintree Guard, which patrolled the streets of Braintree, kept Braintree's industries and factories safe. They even started their own gun club, which still exists today in Braintree. So there's a lot of fascinating history. There's a lot of stories to be told from the citizens of this community. And I picked 3 that I thought really captured the diversity of the war and the different roles that people played in the armed services. One is Captain William Taylor, who was a past member of the Braintree Historical Society and a valued member of the community for many years. He was also a part of the Home Guard. Again, in World War II, he helped form, I believe, 2 or 3 companies for the home front. Another is Dr. Ripley, Dr. Harold Ripley, who was a doctor here in the town of Braintree and also a very big part of Braintree's community. I know that he was on the draft board during World War II, as well as on the working for a lot of very big hospitals in the area. And the third veteran that is represented here in this display is John F. Lipp, who was a member of the 315th Ammunition Train during World War II. Which served a pivotal role in making sure that supplies and ammunition got to the front and that the wounded got back to the rear for timely medical treatment. And it was really a pivotal role. It was the first time that horses had been replaced with vehicles. Men had to be trained as mechanics in order to deal with them. John F. Lipp was one of those men. And it really was the first time that you saw the horse go out of the window and the vehicle come into the picture as far as the military. So now what I'd like to do is maybe take you around and show you some of the artifacts that belong to these men and maybe explain a little bit of their meaning and how they benefit us in our understanding of the World War I period today. Some of the many artifacts that we have that are from these 3 individuals are big and small, of all sizes, of all descriptions. Some of them, in this case, we have John F. Lipp's gun cleaning kit. And as you can see, it's a very simple. It's just a metal tube with a piece of rope. On one end is attached a bristle pad for scrubbing out the bore of the gun. Another side has a small tool, probably for cleaning and dismantling and putting the gun back together. And then there are 2 simple brushes that were used to clean dirt and grease and mud out of the different parts of the weapon. We also have John Lipp's gas mask. This was issued to him. It is a British small box respirator that was actually introduced to the British soldiers in April of 1916, shortly before the Battle of the Somme. By the time John F. Lipp arrives in France in 1917, these are standard issue to both American Expeditionary Force members and the members of the French Army. As you can see, John's has been used. It's been checked for holes and for repairs. And we actually have a photo of John showing the proper way to wear the gas mask. Another interesting thing about the photo that I just mentioned with John wearing his gas mask is he's shown with a model 1917 American Enfield. The American Enfield was an exact copy almost of the British Enfield manufactured in the United States by many different companies, one of which was Eddystone. It's a very common misconception about World War I soldiers that most of them were issued 03 Springfields. This is not the case. More members of the AEF were issued British Enfields or American Enfields than ever saw an 03, and some of them were issued 03s, but the minute they got off the boat in France, they were taken away from them, and they were given French or British armament. What we have here in this case are three of the main guns that would have been in the hands of members of the American Expeditionary Forces, starting at the top with the Model 1903 Springfield, the 1917 Enfield, and the Mk3 Lee Enfield, which was the main service rifle of the British troops. We also have a Model 1917 Knuckle Duster. These were very common with British soldiers, and when the Americans came on the scene, they made their own version. This particular one was made in New Britain, Connecticut, and they were commonly referred to as knuckle dusters. They were also designed to be similar to a bayonet, where they were pyramidal, meaning that any wound that was inflicted with it could not be sutured shut. It was very difficult to do so with a wound of that type. As you can see, many of the weapons that were available to the soldiers at the time were very brutal, bloody weapons, and you would really end up in close quarters combat a lot of times, which is why you're always issued a bayonet in case you ran out of ammunition or in case things got really too close quarters. As you can see, the bayonet is extremely long. It's almost like a sword, and it's really meant to shorten the distance between you and your enemy. The longer the bayonet, you know, the less close you have to be to your enemy in order to stick them. And as you can see over here, we have a large selection of artifacts that belong to Dr. Harold Ripley, another longtime resident of the town of Braintree, including a portable surgeon's kit, which Dr. Ripley would have carried with him wherever he went. As you can see, it has a large selection of rather nasty-looking tools. We also have what he would have, the backpack he would have carried all of this in, the Model 1912 ration bag, which is rather an interesting piece. It was never designed to be a medic's backpack. It was actually designed in 1912 to be used as a feed bag for the cavalry, the United States Cavalry. As we all know, by the time World War I came to be, cavalry was really a thing of the past. And the United States Army had a whole bunch of these Model 1912 ration bags that they had nothing to do with. They found very quickly that medics actually preferred the bag because unlike the Model 1910 haversack, which was a very big, bulky backpack, this was actually more small, compact, and it allowed the surgeon or medic wearing it to get to his medical pouch in the back of his web belt, whereas the Model 1910 did not allow you to do that. We also have a page out of a diagnosis book that was kept by Dr. Ripley, in which he wrote down the names and diagnoses of all the patients he treated while based at Base Hospital 44. And as you can see, there's the list of maladies run the gamut from trench foot and gastric ulcers to gas attacks, victims of gas attacks. Another interesting thing that we have is actually his grooming kit, which is complete with razor blades and a tiny pocket mirror, and even a leather belt to sharpen your razors, including also his toothbrush and his carrying case for it. Dr. Ripley was a man always on the go, and his artifacts show that he lived a very transient life. And on the other side of the case here, we have a selection of items that belonged to Captain William Barker Taylor. Captain Taylor is a very interesting individual, and he's actually one of my favorite people to have researched for this. Captain Taylor was already a veteran by the start of World War I. He had served in the Massachusetts National. Afterwards, he had gotten a successful and very, very well-paying job with the Waterman Pen Company. But when the United States entered World War I, he felt it his duty to answer the call. So he joined up with the United States Army and became a captain in the 305th Engineers. Captain Taylor felt that it was his duty to record his personal experiences, and we're very fortunate to have a small red leather memo book that he carried with him throughout his entire time with the American Expeditionary Forces in France. And shortly after the armistice, he recorded all of his experiences in this small book, which makes for a very detailed and vivid account of the Meuse-Argonne offensive and Armistice Day itself. Another very interesting thing about Captain Taylor is he brought a camera with him. We have a Kodak camera that was his personal camera, and many of the photos that you'll see from the 305th Engineers were actually taken by Captain Taylor. And we actually have photos that were taken shortly after the war when Captain Taylor was touring France, which gives a very interesting account of what what happened after Armistice Day. Obviously the soldiers didn't just stand around and wait to go home. Another interesting thing that we have is something that I really didn't know what it was up until recently. It's called a musette bag. And this one's interesting in that it is a British-made bag that was purchased or acquired by Captain Taylor while in France. And it is something that he's decorated with a Cross of Lorraine, a white cross on a blue background. And these were really used to supplement the Model 1910 haversack, which was meant to carry everything that a soldier needed in battle. But it really didn't in real life. There were a lot of things, a lot of necessities that a soldier just couldn't cram in there. So something like this was really invaluable to anyone who really needed to carry more stuff. Over at this case here, we have a selection of small items that belong to all three of the men that are represented in this display here. Among them, we have a very interesting notebook, which was kept by Private John F. Lipp while studying at Camp Wentworth, which before the war was Wentworth Institute. When the war started, the military realized very quickly that they needed a lot of engineers and a lot of very skilled people very quickly. So the Wentworth Institute turned over their entire campus to the United States Army, and all of their teachers and all of their staff, which were used to train engineers and mechanics and any other skilled laborers or skilled technicians that the American Expeditionary Forces might have needed. Also, we have some very interesting photos that were taken by Private Lipp, which show the Wentworth campus and many of the men that he was studying with. And we also have a overseas cap. Now, the overseas cap was really something that came into being during World War I. Up to the beginning of the First World War, many members of the armed forces had a Montana Peak hat, or a Model 1911 campaign hat, which was kind of very much a cowboy hat. But it was not a good thing to have when you're in the trenches. You couldn't put a helmet on over it. It was was not easy to store. So many of the men adopted the overseas cap and made their own. This example was made by a friend of Private Lipp's by the name of Frank Tropp in May of 1919. And if you look back to the photo of Private Lipp, you can actually see him wearing this very same hat. Unfortunately, Private Lipp's uniform did not survive the war, but we do have his 90th Division shoulder patch, which was a theater-made patch made overseas for troops to sew onto their uniforms. And we also have his small military-issued sewing kit, which was also referred to as a housewife. And it would have contained everything you needed to keep your uniform looking as proper and in repair as you could. One of the smallest items here, but I think is a very interesting one, are these collar discs, which were issued to all members of the Braintree Home Guard, which was Braintree's own police force, if you will. They were meant to make sure that none of the local industries in Braintree were sabotaged, and also really just to keep the peace. And next to that, if you'll notice, we also have Captain William B. Taylor's officer's identity card, which was issued to him when he was overseas. Another interesting item we have here is this armband down here, which was a souvenir that Private Lipp brought back from the war with him. If you'll notice, it's a yellow band, and on the front in black lettering it says Kriegsvergangener Bahn. Kriegsvergangener Bahn, roughly translated in German, means prisoner of war train. And this armband would have been worn by Allied POWs who were working on German railroads, either repairing them or whatever you will. Now, to our right here, we have a selection of trench art shells. Trench art, a lot of people, when you think of trench art, you think of a guy in a trench somewhere just hammering out a shell. That's not the case. This was a very labor-intensive thing, and a lot of these would be made by civilians behind the enemy, behind the lines, who had a large amount of military surplus that was just lying around to use. And they would sell these to veterans or to soldiers on their way home. Soldiers did make things like this as well, but they would most likely make them in the rear, whether they're in hospitals convalescing or they were just behind the main lines trying to keep things running. And you'll notice that there's a large variety of shells. Most of them are French, although this one right here is an American-made shell, which was less common than the French-made shells. You see a lot more trench art made from French shells. One of the different forms of trench art that you see also are items like this here. This is a very simple little German belt buckle that someone has hammered flat and turned into a protective cover for a matchbook. Trench art came in all shapes and sizes, from letter openers to vases to even soup dishes. And soldiers got very creative, and civilians too got very creative over there in the war zone. Another interesting item here is Dr. Ripley's officer's footlocker. This is something that he would have carried with him overseas, and it would have held all of his personal effects. And as you can see, it's been decorated by him. On the sides, you'll notice that it says Stateroom, American Expeditionary Forces, complete with his name and the hospital that he was going to be going to overseas, Base Hospital 44. Trunks like this were very common with officers. An enlisted man would not be given one of these. You would have everything that you owned and everything that you needed in your Model 1910 haversack. Officers, of course, got a lot more junk to carry around than privates. One of the final items I'd like to talk about tonight is this uniform here. This is a complete uniform that was issued to a Private Carlton Prescott of the 101st Artillery. 101st Artillery was part of the 26th Yankee Division, and if you look here you can see the 26th Yankee Division patch clearly visible on the side of the sleeve. This is pretty much everything that a soldier in the trench would have had on. As you can see, you have your box respirator, which is around your chest so that you can easily get to your gas mask and put it on. You'd have a canteen. On the back here, this is the Model 1910 haversack that I've been talking about. As you can see, it really was meant to be an all-encompassing kind of a backpack. You were supposed to have everything you needed in here. Your bayonet, you would have your mess kit in here, as well as your any other mess kit gear you might need besides your plate and fork. You would have an entrenching tool. Also in here you would have your tent, sleeping bag, spare clothing, socks. Up in here you would have shaving gear. It was standard practice in the AEF that everyone had to shave every day. Otherwise there was a chance that the gas mask might not fit properly around your face, which was always a concern. Also down here you'll notice it has leggings, or puttees as some people might like to call them. This was really meant to keep mud and dirt out of your boots, to keep water from getting in. You'll notice that it's all made out of wool, very heavy, itchy on your skin, holds in a lot of heat. In the summertime this would have been a nightmare to wear, but in the cold months it would be just what you needed. Also you'll notice that it has a web pouch around it. This would have carried all of your ammunition, either for your Enfield or 03 Springfield or Eddystone, whatever you might have been issued. One of the main drawbacks to this uniform is really the backpack. The backpack straps would often dig into your shoulder, your armpit, and make your arm go numb if you wore it for too long. Another problem is if you needed to get your bayonet out, you couldn't do it yourself. You could try, but it wouldn't be easy. So a lot of times you'd have to have the guy behind you take out your bayonet and hand it to you in order to get it on to your gun. This uniform is very interesting in that the 101st Artillery was housed in a huge network of caves, really an underground city, if you will, called the Chemdadams Cave System. The Chemdadams Cave System, like I said, it was really an underground city. It had hundreds and hundreds of people. It had its own churches, movie theaters, barracks, hospitals. It went on for miles, and you would have had artillerymen like Private Prescott here. You would have had our engineers like Captain Taylor, regular soldiers, even radio men, all working together, living underground in this cave system. And when it came time to either do a charge or to man your artillery guns, there were many different entrances that would take you up to the surface. sometimes miles away from where you started. Well, that's about all we have here today as far as our World War I display here at the Braintree Historical Society. I thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll tune in next time when Jim Fahey, the head archivist here at the Braintree Historical Society, will talk to us in more detail about the discovery of the Chenda Dam's cave system, the artifacts that were found there, and the role that it played in the First World War. Yet again, thank you, and I hope you'll join us next time.